Okay, part two, my writing. Um, so early 1990s, 93, thereabouts, 90, 93, 94, I think is when I started dabbling with writing. That's also around the time that I started um, playing around with architectural designs of castles, forts, towns, cities, even waterways, and just elaborate things like that. I grew up playing with Legos, and uh, with one Lego, or some Legos, I started creating a landscape, and I realized like, well, this I feel a little limited, so that's why I moved to sketch paper and started drawing using lines and different colored and things like that. Um, so my early writing, um, I want to say like maybe the first fan fiction thing would have been for Lord of the Rings. I just had this idea of a story, and that kernel of a story is what would become a Gang of Daggers. But I did have several other stories in my mind, and things like I started writing, um, like I had a dream about vampires. At the time, Interview with the Vampire was huge, and so just some random dream and decided to write it out as a story involving my friends, and maybe that wasn't the best. Um, the took a typing class my junior year, I think. But and in there, I really started playing around and messing around with writing ideas of stories. Um, the common theme about them was definitely action, adventure, fantasy world. People leaving their comfort zone and finding themselves in a new place where they have to survive and uh, fight against the odds, fight against the forces of nature or evil or whatever is going to challenge them, and create a new life, a new home for themselves. Um, so that's happening over and over again. These different stories I'm writing. Um, Very little magic, mostly just swords and shields, but also a lot of exposition, description, just exploring. Like I'm creating and crafting this environment a certain way, but I'm not telling a story while I'm doing it. I'm not a good storyteller at that moment, that time. I, towards the end of high school, got into a street hockey club, uh, was on swim team for 2 years, went into karate, Okinawa style, and also really started embracing Bruce Lee, like just studying him, learning about him. When I went off to college, I found myself, it was difficult for me to make friends, and I turned to online to connect with people, found a email list related to Final Fantasy video games, and was able to just interact with people in a unique way there. And then, for whatever reason, a interactive writing project developed, set in the Final Fantasy universe. And so myself and other people would participate by writing chapters and adding, a new chapter to the story that was being created. Usually, each person had their own persona or character that they were writing, for and presenting to everyone else. So others are writing a page or two of sort of script dialogue, like the line of dialogue space, line of dialogue space, a sentence or two of description, then space, another line of dialogue. And I'm writing thick narrative with the scriptures, characters, interactions, and uh, doing that for basically the course of the 4 years in college. I developed a writing style that, like learning to write in episodes. So dream up of an idea like, well, what's the next thing that could happen in the story, and craft a chapter with its own beginning, middle, and end to it. So it's its own self-contained story that adds to the overall story arc. and just write and add that to the chapter, and I could do that every other day. Um, it would take a few hours, 2 or so hours, but yeah, it was just something I could do and interact and have fun. Um, you know, After a while, I realized that I was learning things in classes. Since I was focusing on English, I was learning things in my class that I could apply to the thing I was writing. So foreshadow, character development, presentation of information, it's different things like that. Um, these were all action adventure stories. Character was fighting a lot. Every chapter almost would feature a battle or a fight of some sort. And I would write out the tactics, write out the way the main character would engage the enemy, and dream up different fortifications they would be fighting around, cities, tactics that could be used in different locations. Really just like, because I've been by this point studying and learning about war and history and battles from video games and books and TV, documentaries, you name it, any source. And one person who was reading my material complained that I was basically creating too much content to read and keep up with. That reading my stuff was like reading Braveheart over and over again, which I kind of took as like, oh, it's, yeah, all right, I'm doing good. Graduated college, joined the Army for 5 years, was able to do some more of the interactive writing projects, but by this point, I was basically doing by myself. So I would had an idea of a story to write, and just start writing out chapters. The universe would still be like Final Fantasy or whatever fantasy world of my creation, but very much based on reality and medieval and setting. And in particular, my first year in the Army, I was having a stressful, difficult time, and I decided to start writing. And basically over the course of a year, wherever I could, I would add a chapter. And that story eventually, like when I finally ended up in this one, my regular job position in the Army, I was able to, just one weekend finally write out this last chapter, and my friend was like, wow, you spent hours just writing that. I was like, yeah, I think this is the best thing I've written, ever. So felt proud about myself. But at that point, I had realized that writing it's serious effort, serious energy, and dedication. To write something serious and legit, to put yourself, to put yourself in the characters, frame of mind, the point of view, to express what they're experiencing to the audience, and present an interesting story and idea to the audience. So that's why when I left the Army, I took some time to sit and actually write out the story that I had conceived of A Gang of Daggers. So